This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda is the news from LibLine. And this week I don't have any news from LibLine. The American Library Association meeting was over this past weekend, and Patrick was at that meeting. So we didn't have our usual meeting on Tuesday this week. Last week was basically we basically talked about the project that is called the Portal and the Infomart. So there wasn't really anything that was brought up during that I need to share with you. So we'll go to the next item, which probably will get some comment. The system problem following the newest point release. When I signed in last week after the day after the point release was signed in, I wasn't signed in first thing in the morning, like at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. It was a little bit later than that. And by the time I was on and seeing the emails, the situation had already been resolved. So I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that, but I thought it might be a good idea to try and find out something more about what was going on and why there was why a problem happened again following a point release that is supposed to just happen and nobody notices. So I sent a message to Jane and asked her what was going on, but the answer I got is probably less than satisfying to all of us. What Jane said is it's complicated, but briefly, a change made for South Central Library System posed issues when it went into production, and the downtime relating to their correcting the issue was correcting the issue that South Central missed in sandbox testing. So we know that the fix wasn't something that we had accounted to us, and I think there was just one in the last point release that was sent in by WALDO. But I don't really have much more of a reason other than there was a bad fix that caused some problems. I'm guessing that it might have been one of the fixes for patron name searching, but that is just a guess on my part. I noticed that some of the comments that were reported in email messages to the WALDO support mailing list mentioned that there was troubles with some of the patron searching that was going on. So that's my only reason for picking on that one. When I noticed the timing of it, it seems like you were down for a little bit over an hour, maybe not quite an hour and a half. And it appeared to me that it didn't happen right away when the libraries opened. So I was wondering if any of you could fill me in on how last Thursday went for you, and tell me whether or not you went into the offline circulation mode and how everything was resolved for you. If anyone has anything to share, I'd certainly be willing to listen.
We hadn't reinstalled the offline circ, so we couldn't use it.
Okay, so you just kept track on paper or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Looking to see who is on the call. Alexander, was there anything specifically that you noticed other than the fact that it was slow? Okay. Not really. Okay. So you experienced some downtime, but it seems from the comments that I've seen that it wasn't it wasn't as bad as if it were like the last day of the semester and you had a lot of items to check in and people were trying to get all of their accounts cleared. Is that correct? Okay, that's good. That's good to know. So I'm hoping that the next time a point release is done that we don't go through this again because we don't have a good track record so far. Since the release of Bibliovation 6.0, there have been 2-point releases and we've had problems after both of them. So I'm hoping that we break that streak next time. Okay, let's go on to the next item on the agenda, and I wrote persistent tabs in at because that's what I got. Yasmin, you should be hearing audio. Other people are hearing it, I believe. I'm not sure what I can do from here. We'll try. Anyway, the persistent tabs in ACK. Ben, I'm going to ask you to talk about this, and if you would like, I can give you control of the screen so you can demonstrate what it is that you're seeing.
My desktop is a mess right now. I don't have anything open. But just logging in to COA and going to acquisitions, it's going to be a really quick topic. You can start to see what I mean.
Okay, so this is in the WALDO sandbox, and
Sure.
I have nothing open.
Right.
So let me just click open orders. And
sure.
these are the tabs that you mean, correct?
That's correct, right. So now you can double click on one of the PO numbers, or you can open another tab for, say, funds. Cool.
Okay.
And now you
can. So now I've got 3 tabs open, and I can flip among them very easily.
Right.
Oh,
now,
one of the things that I noticed a long time ago is that if you refresh the page, which we tend to do an awful lot if we're doing testing and whatnot, all these tabs go away. But that's not the case anymore. He said, hoping you wasn't lying. Yep, there they are. Okay.
Which for me was actually annoying to begin with because I had like 8 tabs open while I was testing something else out, and I wanted to get rid of them all. So I had gotten into the habit of hitting F5 just to clear all the tabs. But oh well, I can't complain too much because I'm sure we've asked to have this this particular problem fixed in the past. So this is not a bug. This is a feature.
It's a feature. Okay. Yeah, because when I got your email describing this, I went and looked at it, and I thought it seemed to me that when I exited acquisitions and went to something else, say patrons, and then went back into acquisitions, all my tabs would be closed and I'd have to open them up again.
Nope. There
And
they are.
now, as you can see, they are still here.
Right.
So in some senses, that's okay. Notice the hesitation in the okay. And in others, it isn't, because when you are going into acquisitions, you want to go specifically to something that you're doing, either something with the funds or something with the purchase orders. And you would not necessarily want to have your funds open all the time. So I understand what the issue is here. It would be nice if the previous behavior existed, but evidently somebody else complained that they didn't like it since their tabs weren't preserved.
Right. Right. I mean, I actually have to agree that this is now behaving the way that one would expect an acquisitions client to work. And as a matter of fact, like I just, while we were talking, I opened up on my browser a new tab for Bibliovation, and then opened up acquisitions, and it opened up the same tabs that I had like very early this morning when I was doing some searching. Even though my original, the other window that I have open with Bibliovation in it isn't even on the acquisitions tab right now. But that's fine. The sort of persistence thing, that's fine.
Yeah. Well,
it's different, not wrong.
Yeah. The very first version of Get It, way back in the day, whenever you opened Get It, which it was then called, which it still is called here, it would always open the purchase orders. So you would always get your purchase order list.
Yeah, that does seem kind of odd that it's not defaulting to purchase orders, because that was by design. It was originally designed to open up with purchase orders because that is the expectation that you would do. You would always work with purchase orders, or almost always.
You would always start with purchase orders and then go into other areas.
Right.
And now it doesn't do that. So usually when I come in here, maybe we should ask them to make those X's bigger.
Yes. Yeah.
So now if I were to come in, go ahead.
Oh no, it's the same. I've complained about that stuff too, and I think they just sort of roll their eyes and say, update your eyeglasses prescription, old man. But
it just was.
It just was. It was fine back in my day, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
It is a little small, especially now since I can't hit F5 and close everything. So.
Well, the other thing that I noticed while I was playing around in acquisition is when you look at it, it looks like we only have this much of real estate to look at, when in fact, when they open acquisitions, I think I'd prefer it if configuration were closed or we're down to just one line as well.
Right.
Because otherwise you don't remember that the hotkeys are here.
Right.
So anyway.
Gosh, I wonder if that's persistent now too.
That configuration is open all the time?
No, that like if you close configuration and then open acquisitions in another tab, if it will pop open with that sidebar in that same configuration, say with like you have now with dashboard and configuration collapsed and with hotkeys opened.
Okay. Yeah. When I first looked at the hotkeys, I haven't looked at these in a while, but when I looked at this and noticed all of these expand arrows, I'm going, there's no way we can see all the hotkeys at one time. So I don't know if that's a problem for anyone. I'm not sure how often the hotkeys are used, but if you use them, great. If you don't use them, this is how you would get to them. That's interesting. Okay, I open it and there is some intelligence built into this, I guess. Okay, well, anyway, that's the persistent tabs in ACK. I haven't noticed that anywhere else in, well, there's no, the only other place where we open things within it is within cataloging. And I haven't noticed that that same thing happens, that if you exit out of cataloging and then go back in, that the same records are still open. Well, I won't try and borrow trouble there. Anyway, that's about all that I have today in terms of new items. And I was wondering if maybe before we close out for today, if maybe we could talk a little bit about 1, reports, and 2, enhancements. The one issue that I wanted to talk about with reports is the fact that from each version in the reports up until Bibliovation 6.0, I tried to make a list of all of the changed table, both the tables themselves and then the fields within the table, so that you would know where there were changes. And I didn't do that for this one because it would have been a pretty big Herculean task, I think, because they weren't enumerated in the release notes. And that's where I usually had picked them up before. They had ended up in the release notes somewhere. So there was a question about getting a report run to get the table schema out so that you could use it to work on reports. And I sent the SQL to the person who requested it, and it didn't work. Worked on the WALDO sandbox, but it didn't work in their database. And one thing that was noticed, and I can show you this. First of all, if you don't have this report, and if you really have a need to see what the schema looks like, what fields are available in the tables, let me just go down. Okay, if you go into the WALDO sandbox ever and look at the reports, notice that if you're looking for table schema, that I've got different versions of it in here. And the one that you should look at now is this one called Table Schema Bibliovation 6.0. In the SQL, there is a place where it says and table schema equals Koha_Waldo. This Koha_Waldo tells it to look for the schema for the Koha database called WALDO. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the only place where it will work is in the WALDO sandbox or the WALDO production version. Okay, and just by eliminating it all. Okay, this actually could be something from version 5.18 then, but at one point I had to have the schema name in here so that the report would run, and Jen just said that they got it working at Hartford just by eliminating this section, this and this section. So if you do have a report already existing in your reports list for getting the table schema, just make sure it doesn't have that and table schema equals Koha_Waldo. There are a lot of differences in the schema. One area that I know that will affect any report that you run for identifying fees and fines assessed against patrons. The whole fees and fine structure was changed, and because of that, if you've run your reports and have found they didn't work, I will hope that you entered a support center ticket to get help with those. Other than that area, I can't think of any other areas that had major changes like that, but that was the primary one. Have you had success running your reports since being on Bibliovation?
Well, some of them certainly require a lot of modification, and there have been some where I just kind of give up and try not to worry about the fact that I have to get the information in 2 different reports or more.
Hi, Becky. We can't hear you just now.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you again.
Okay. Thank you, Sierra, for putting that note out about not being able to hear me, because I didn't notice that my phone had dropped. Okay, what I was talking about to myself here is the enhancements list, and I had just finished telling you that I have not been paying real close attention to the enhancements, and I'm not certain if the list that I have here encompasses everything that has been suggested. So if you had suggested something and it's not here, let me know and I'll make sure it gets on here again. I think, Stephen, that the number 8, you said that that probably wasn't something that needed to be here anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they fixed that up.
Okay, I'll take that out. But anyway, if there's anything that you would like to have added to this list, please do so. If there are any of the items that are on the list that you would like to see sent forward as a request to actually get the programming done, I would also appreciate knowing that, because and let John know that there's something that we need to get on the development list. And well, actually, we'll have to go through the whole process of getting a quote for the feature and then get it scheduled onto the development schedule and wait a little bit of time to get it. But that is something that I am willing and able to do very easily. And just to remind you that it's not just the list of the 2019-2020, but it's also the enhancements that are in the chart here, or in the grid. These are things that we had identified earlier, and these are things that we hadn't really asked to have added to the development schedule, but we certainly could do that. And yes, Jen, I know it, the authority ones. South Central is the one that we were waiting for, and South Central did move to Bibliovation 6.0 in December, and they are still doing some, LibLine is still doing some wind-up work, or some wind-up work for South Central, getting things the way that they had requested them. And once they are done with that, I think that it will be appropriate to talk to them again about authorities. I don't think we should wait too long. I can contact, I think it would be Amy, and find out when they would be ready to start looking at the authority fixes that we would like to have done and they would like to have done, so we could set up a priority order with them. So I'll send her a message and ask her about that. The next meeting we have, I'll report back on what I hear from her. Sierra, the only way that I can say is that the enhancement lists anymore are prioritized by someone saying that they want to have this feature included. That's not a very strong method for identifying the prioritization, but we have some enhancement ideas that are listed here, but I think that we've sort of fallen into the habit of, well, we'll see what we get in the software, and if there's something that isn't working, we'll report it. Or if something works and we don't like it, we'll report it as a bug and see what happens. But if there's something that you think that would be good for the software, that would have usability for almost any library that's using the software, then that's something that we would propose. The process that we use once we do identify a feature that we want to have added is that I make sure John knows about it. John will then work with me to get LibLine to get a quote on the feature. If LibLime can't tell from the words that we use. You'll notice that some of these descriptions are a little longer than others, and obviously longer than what we have on the top list. Before we send it for a quote, we would probably work to enhance this a little bit by either giving some examples of what we would like to have it do, or identify the problems that exist because this feature isn't there. So first we would expand the enhancement request. John and I would make it in the format that we have to in order to send it to LibLime. LibLime would then identify how long it would take to do the programming, and also give us a price estimate. That usually doesn't come back to the group of libraries. That's something that John and I will talk about, and if it's something that we think should be done, we'll just go ahead and order it, and it will be done. There is another route that can be taken for enhancements, and that's for you to directly ask LibLime. Usually those requests go to Patrick Jones and identify what it is that you want. He would get a quote back to you, and then whatever programming was done and added to the software would be available to everyone. Ben, yes, I agree. I think that this would be the year of authorities enhancements. One of the first, just so you, let me give you a little bit of background first. When authorities was added into the system, they didn't ask us how to store the records, and the way that they stored the records makes it very difficult to do reports against the authority records that exist. They, instead of storing them in MARC format like the bib records and the holding records are, they are stored in what is called JSON, JSON format. Which basically I think is a more efficient way to store the data. It just makes it a little harder for us to try and get any information out of that data. So one of the things that I would encourage us to think about is requesting that the MARC records be made available in a database as MARC records so that we can run reports against them. For display purposes and purposes of how the software functions now, I don't think we want to change that. But if the authorities file, yes, I agree. The authorities file could be mounted on the server that the database files are mounted on the report server. I think that would be better for all of us, because then we would be able to do the MARC polls that we wanted to do, and we would still have the authority records as we wanted to see them. So that's one thing that I would probably want to add to the list, to make those available so we could do reports. Even though reports with the way that the MARC records are set up right now are not always that easy to do, at least we know how to do them. And it would help, I think, a lot. Okay, so right now I'm not going to ask you for any additional enhancement ideas to come up with off the top of your head, but think about it. And if you think of something, send me a quick email and I'll add it to the enhancements list. And we can take some time during our next meetings to talk about the enhancement requests and maybe flesh out the ideas a little bit more so there will be more words on this screen. So when it comes to actually requesting them, will have an easier time.
It would be great if they would update the reports library document. So instead of saying any reports you have with these following fields won't work anymore, fix them. Instead of saying that, they could provide some guidance as to how to fix them for each of those, because those were actually pretty useful fields.
Yes. Yes. Well, they can convert almost any file from one format to another. So seems like even if it were a quick cron job to scan through all the reports and look for specific field names like date last seen, items.date last seen, that would have been a big help, at least even to identify them so you'd know it's something that you needed to look at. We can come up with some good ideas for them, I think. Okay, is there anything else that anybody would like to talk about today?
Just out of curiosity, do you know anything more about the mutation times?
All I know about that is that it appeared, and it is in the table schema. I did see it in the table schema, but I have no idea what it means. I did try at one point to find out what it means, but I never got an answer to it. I don't know, Ben, you would run into that too.
Yeah,
that mutation.
Right. Yeah, I actually had to go backwards through my email to find when that change had taken place, and I actually found the answer in like 2017. So it's not really a recent change. I don't know if they've actually gotten rid of some of the old table schema in favor of now just using the mutated stuff. But I did find that it was quite some time ago that they had made that change. And I mentioned before that it wasn't a simple change. It's not as if one table was changed to a different name. It's actually existing table data that's now controlled through a different process and reported on via a different process, which is why it's mutated. Well, it's not why it's mutated, but it's why it looks like it anyways.
Stephen, that probably doesn't answer your question, but at least it gives a little bit more history.
Oh yeah, no, I mean if ever they wanted to provide a little bit more of an explanation as to what that does and why they decided to do it that way, I would be interested. I need to find a time when I'm really doing nothing important and go in and take a look at that table.
Yeah. I haven't looked in the user manual. I wonder if it's addressed in the user manual. I'll do some searching and see if I can find it.
I think probably super librarians have mutation times.
That's how we got our
Yeah.
superpowers. Yeah. I have to say that LibLime's done a pretty good job over the years of creating a sort of database of SQL queries that you can go and take a look at. But we've almost gotten to the point where rather than going and seeing if we can find an SQL query that we can use or slightly modify in order to get it to work, we could get some sort of SQL element collection, so that if we say, okay, well, for my report, I basically want to have like bibliographic information, item information, and information on when the last time it was checked out. And then you can go and look up what those elements are with instructions and then plug them into the report that you want to create.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I'll have Jen start working on that. Kidding, Jen.
If we come up with something like that, I think that they'd be willing to put it on their, maybe add it as an addenda to their online reports. When you go into the reports module, one of the options is to look at the LibLime reports library. And if you haven't looked at them, it is pretty extensive. They do have quite a few things in here. My biggest problem with this is my eyes don't like to work in straight lines. So without having cell lines around everything, some of these are hard to read. But you can see they've got well over 100. So there are lots of things in here, but you have to intuit whether or not the description of the report matches with what you want. And then sometimes you need to modify the actual SQL so that you get what you want rather than where they are or how they are written here. I would expect that this particular file will be changed sometime soon. I won't say it will be changed really soon because, as you notice, this says still LibLime Academic Collab version 5.20 and above. With Bibliovation, there is only one version of the software. So wherever there are two possible, like right here, this particular SQL is for South Central, but now because it's all in one, that it could actually be in fewer columns. I'll make Jane stay. I'll ask her when she's going to update this particular document. It's probably a good idea. She's half a country away from me, so she can't just whack me one. Okay,
Me too.
so yeah. So anyway, that's all that I've got for today. We've actually talked a lot longer than I thought we would. But if there's anything else that you want to bring up today, please speak up or send a chat. And if I don't see anything in the next 15 to 20 seconds, we'll consider the meeting over. Okay, and people are leaving, so I assume that means we're done. Thank you, everybody. The recording will be, you're welcome. I'll get the recording out on YouTube as soon as it's processed and ready to go.